Ayyar, and he's a self-realized person, and he has written lots of books on self-realization and following the path of Sri Bhagavan Ramana Maharishi, and his meditations on self-inquiry as well as surrender are very powerful. And at a young age itself, he had a great calling, and he's a graduate of law school in Harvard, and but still, he chose to leave everything and then dedicate his life to this purpose of educating us to elevate to higher level. His aim is to have the serious seekers, and the serious seekers he wants to really lift them up. And he had lots of knowledge, and with Swami Bodhananda he drove as a teenager a road trip from west coast to east coast, and he talked and so much about all the Vedanta questions and things like that, and Upanishad, and there's a lot of background with that. So he wrote irreverent questions that as a undergrad or in middle school, elementary, he had great of wisdom on it. And Swamiji could see the spark in him when he was age 7 itself. So now he has been coming here. This is the 3rd year or 4th year, and all these sessions, especially the practical way of realizing yourself or seeing who you are, and he has guided all of us really very well. And you will get lots of clarity, and you will be able to understand everything afterwards. That's I'm speaking by my own experience, and anything told as underlying concept or revelation told in the Upanishad or what is it, Brahmana Maharishi's question and answers. So he gives answers, and then you will have clarity of that answer very well, because you go through the training with him. So that is from my experience. I know there are several people who have been having the same journey for these 3-4 years with him. And so he has got a website. What is your website?
It's called siftingtothetruth.com. Not shiftingtothetruth.com, but siftingtothetruth.com. Yeah, a little bit too long, but that's what it is.
And he also has got a psychology degree, and so he really gives lots of counseling with people too. So he guides people to the right psychotherapist, psychoanalyst, and he'll make sure that you have any problem with your mind getting stuck somewhere to practice your spirituality, and he will help you through that and then come to the higher stage. So with that said, I welcome Akilesh Ayyar.
Thank you so much.
Just some logistics here.
Yeah.
We are going to start. Anusha,
Yeah.
Yeah. We also want to have some basic logistics here. Bathroom is outside, so right next to the elevator. So if you go out, it's next to the elevator. There are locks. So if you see, there is just below the AC controller, there is the bathroom ports. So there is second floor, women's and men's bathroom ports are separate, and we have written the code in yellow. Rest of them are also there, just in case something doesn't work, you can go down or up. So that those bathroom codes are right there. Okay, you just below this, right. If you go to the wall, you will see the codes. Okay. Yeah. Anil, do you want to start with the writing?
Yeah.
Namaste everyone, thank you for joining in today. Friday evening, everyone could choose to party, and we were saying like, yes, we are partying together here at Yoga Bharati's new center in Santa Clara. Thank you for blessing us with your presence. Let's begin with lighting the lamp, and let's invite Anilji and Akilesh. And nicknamed you now. Let us chant Omkara as we proceed to light. Sit comfortably. I think this you may want to see, or keep your eyes closed and see it.
Just
Turn it. Oh, okay. Yes, there we go. there's a child lock here.
Oh, yes.
Safety lock.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Now you go. Asatoma.
Yeah, Asatoma, yes.
Sadgamaya tamasoma jyotirgamaya mrityorma amritam gamaya Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
As we sit here, I want you to take a moment to close your eyes, and before we begin the session, center yourself here at this moment in the presence of Akilesh ji here. Closing your eyes and listen to this. हमको मन की शक्ति देना, मन विजय करे, दूसरों से के जैसे पहले खुद को जय करे। हमको मन की शक्ति देना, भेदभाव अपने दिल से हम निकाल दें, दोस्तों से भूल हो तो माफ कर सके, झूठ से बचे रहे, सच का दम भरे, दूसरों के जैसे पहले खुद को जय करे। हमको मन की शक्ति देना। धन्यवाद।
Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction and beautiful song, and for starting us out in this very calm and grounded way. So, I want to give you a very, very, very brief overview of the spiritual search, and particularly colored, of course, by ideas of Ramana Maharishi. So, just very simply, right, what is it about? Basically, the idea is that we are misidentified. We're misidentified with an individual person. It feels as if we are a thinking, doing, experiencing mind and body, trapped in an individual perspective. And it's a very, very deep, profound, subtle illusion. Oh, sorry, is there a problem?
Yeah, unmuted.
Oh, is it muted? Oh, I see. Sorry about that. Okay, it was muted. Okay, well, I'll repeat myself. So I was just saying, I'm going to give a very, very brief summary sketch of the spiritual search. Basically, that there is a profound misidentification with the individual person, which seems to be experiencing and doing. And, you know, this is supported by a kind of illusion. And the purpose of the spiritual search is to penetrate that illusion, quite simply. The illusion is supported by the movement of the mind, basically, which is propelled by its attachments. So there's an identification with the person, which is the mind and the body, and its commitments, basically, its desires, its fears, and its relationships, etc. And those are the attachments that move the mind. And moving the mind sustains the illusion of identification, and identification propels further attachments. So we are trying to stick something into this wheel, basically, to slow it down and eventually stop it, break the illusion. So how does Ramana Maharishi go about this? He basically recommends, essentially, two key techniques. Technique, broadly speaking, really. So I'm going to describe them both. So the first is called self-inquiry, which I've described to many of you before, but I'll repeat it because it really can't be repeated enough. I'll describe it, we'll practice it, and then discuss your experiences, and then I'll describe surrender, practice that, and then we'll discuss experience, then we can keep going from there. But fundamentally, the basic idea is with both of these techniques, you can mix and match them, and they're not meant to just be done in an isolated, sitting meditation session. There's nothing wrong with doing them there, but and we will be doing them in that way right here, in fact. But the basic idea is to try eventually to bring them into waking everyday life and to practice them constantly. And when you try to practice them constantly, they will run up against your resistance to doing so. The resistance to doing so is the resistance to giving up control. That's the resistance that propels and keeps the identification with the individual person going. So anyway, so we're trying to stop that movement of mind, eventually get down to the illusion at the bottom, and when that falls away, what will be revealed is a self-luminous truth about what you actually are, which is not an object, not a person, but something which is pure, perfect, complete, beyond time and space, and in fact beyond description, even though I've just given the description. So, okay, so what's the first technique? The first technique is the one for which Maharishi is most famous, which is self-inquiry. And Maharishi is really, what he is of course a brilliant, genius distiller of the entire Vedantic tradition, right? This is the Vedantic tradition, he's just put it in these unbelievably simple terms. And these methods are, in fact, extremely, extremely simple, really. The complexity is all going to arise from resistances to the practice. It's our individual psychological resistances that then usher in huge complexities. But the actual methods are really, dead simple. And anyway, you'll see that. And also, I'll add in that the methods, I described them, you're going to practice them now, but if you practice them further, they will teach you what they are, actually. What they seem to be initially may not be your later understanding of what they are. You have a certain understanding now, because, you can't really describe, like almost anything really just in words, right? Like, color or sound cannot be fully described in words. Similarly, these techniques cannot be fully described in words. These are just pointers. You try them out, and then you adjust. You start to learn. They start to teach you things. Anyway, so the first technique is self-inquiry. What is self-inquiry? So self-inquiry basically proceeds from the very ordinary experience of oneself in the moment as being alive, essentially, as being aware, as existing at all. So that basic idea is that every moment, experience is going on. Experience means everything that your senses bring in, right? It's everything you're seeing and hearing and touching and smelling and tasting, plus everything that you're emotionally experiencing, right? Any emotions, plus any quote-unquote thoughts, right? So any memories or desires or verbal thoughts or images or any of that stuff, all of that stuff put together, right, is experience. So you have the different objects of experience, but then you also simultaneously have another fact, which is that when you're experiencing, there's also the fact of an entity that seems to be experiencing these things. That's that sense of I'm here as the observer of all of these things. So seems to be fairly evident what the different objects of experience are. A sight, a sound, a particular thought, particular emotion. But what self-inquiry says is, what's the subject part? The I part that seems to be observing, the part that seems to be feeling like it's alive or aware, etc., right? What is that? And when I say what is that, what self-inquiry is trying to do is trying to turn one's attention to that facet of one's experience. Because you are experiencing this fact pretty indisputably, like, oh, are you here? Yeah, I'm here, right? That sense, just that. Are you seeing this right now? Yeah, I'm seeing this right now. Where do you go when you consult that, right? Like, are you seeing these, seeing someone seem to be talking right now? And you're like, yes, of course I am, right? So you go to consult something, that thing which you consult, which is, seems to be you. So So self-inquiry is trying to turn one's attention towards you. And the cardinal rule of self-inquiry is that as you try to locate what it is you are, or AKA who it is you are, or another phrase of putting it, way of putting it is where you are. These are all synonymous phrases. As you try to do that, you're going to turn your attention towards something, okay? Whatever that something may be, the basic question you ask yourself is, am I aware of this something? And the answer is inevitably going to be yes. And if you are aware of that something, then that cannot be you, because you're aware of it, and you're looking for the thing you're looking for whatever is aware of it. So, you're looking for yourself, and then you come to something, and then, well, that can't be you. It felt like you for a second, but it isn't you, because you're aware of it. And then you repeat the exercise. You can repeat the exercise either by saying, well, what's aware of this then? Or you can simply go back to the base experience, the base experiential fact, which is that basic sense of your own existence. And you're hunting that, because you have that, but what is it? What is it in your own experience? What actually is it? And we're trying to answer this question not by figuring it out. We're trying to answer this question by literally trying to attend to it, right? In a kind of analogous fashion to, again, if I said, you're feeling an itch somewhere on your body. Where is that itch, right? You're turning your attention towards that, right? Or, there's a sound in the background. I want you to focus on that, right? You're trying to turn your attention. This is a focusing exercise. So here, you're trying to focus on you, as opposed to any particular thing that you're experiencing. And yeah, so let's all try that, okay, for 5 minutes. Just try that. I suggest if you can, although it's not a requirement, to keep your eyes open while you do this, because of the general idea that you want to try to import this exercise into other parts of your life. So if you practice it with eyes open, even when you're sitting down, it'll be more, transferable to other more common domains of your life. So let's just sit for 5 minutes and try that and see how it goes. Anyone want to discuss what their experience was like? Please.
I felt like I was trying to hold my breath, just in case I slipped back into my thought world. So, I was trying to become blank rather, but that would bring me back to myself, the mind and body.
So where did your mind go when you were looking for I? Where did your mind go exactly?
Actually, for me, it doesn't go anywhere. I just experience myself. Feels like something inside me. That's
right. So that's it. I'll also mention a couple of points here. So one is, we're not necessarily trying to stop all thought. Not exactly. I mean, maybe in some ultimate sense, yes, but in the usual sense, no. So, the key point is to examine to whom all these thoughts are occurring. And similarly, even if you have a blank, let's just suppose, right? What you said is very key, that you just sort of felt like, oh, I'm just experiencing something inner. So that sense of experiencing something inner, were you aware of it?
Yes.
Yes, right? So therefore that can't be you. That's a sense of something inner, which is it's a feeling, basically, of some kind, right? And so to notice that and then say, well, okay, that's not me. So where am I? I know that I'm here experiencing this feeling of something inner. So that knowledge of me as apart from this feeling, as the experiencer of this feeling of something inner, must be something separate from that feeling. That knowledge is a separate piece of my experience, so to say. Does that make sense? So then you try to turn to that. That would be the next step in the process. And then you would repeat the process again and again and again. Does that make sense?
But are we equipped to even get there?
Yes, you are. Yes, the answer is yes. So when you hunt like this, you're right. You won't necessarily get to the answer immediately, or perhaps not for a long time. But when you hunt for the answer, what happens is, especially when you try. I mean, really, any amount of this will help you to some extent, for sure. But especially when you bring it out into the real world, because the aspiration is, the hope is, every waking moment. That's the hope, that you're trying this every waking moment. When you try this every waking moment, what happens is it runs up against resistances. Those resistances stem from attachments. Attachments are based on the idea that I have certain goals, I want to avoid certain things, I want certain things, and I can control the situation. And I have to exert effort to control the situation. And if I'm doing this practice of self-inquiry, well, I can't control the situation, basically. The reality is, actually, there is no control of the situation. You're not who you think you are. You have no control over your actions, which is very counterintuitive and subversive, but it's true. And what happens is when those thoughts arise of being worried about something or needing something, wanting something, right? And then the desire to control it, right? If that's given an opportunity to be fed into the inquiry, what do I mean by that? I mean, like, who's having this thought? Like, oh, I need to pay the bills, I need to pick up the kids, I need to cook this, or whatever it is, right? Get the car repaired, or whatever it is that you think you need to do. If that thought can be pointed towards the fact that it has an experiencer. And now when you look for that experiencer, here's one very crucial thing. You don't know who the experiencer is. So even before you do find out who you are, really a huge thing is admitting to yourself, which is, it's not something you can just wish into existence. You'll have to do it and it will come in time, but is really taking into one's full consciousness the fact that you don't know who you are, which is a really big deal. Because the reason that we care about all the stuff that we seem to care about is because it's connected to me. And we assume that we know who me is. Yeah, of course, I know, I'm me. Me, meaning what? Meaning some incoherent, unthought about jumble of ideas. That's really what it is. It's like a person, kind of, sometimes a body, sometimes a mind, it has certain relationships, it's not well thought out. But if we actually investigate, then before we even end the investigation, the first huge thing is recognizing that we have a serious problem. We literally don't know who we are. And then in that admission, the attachment weakens. Because why do I care if I don't know who I am? See, I care because I thought I knew who I was. Now if I don't know who I am, I don't know why I care. So I don't care as much. And when that attachment weakens, you're going to experience a certain degree of peace. It's associated with that, basically. And then you're going to want to do more of a practice. And then the attachments will weaken further. And you'll want to do more of the practice and more of the practice. And this is the kind of wheel that turns, basically. So, yeah. Others?
When you say we have no control of our action, what does that mean? Because we acted to come here, so we were in control of our action over here.
Right. So the body and the mind definitely came here, it's true. But the question is whether or not that's who you are. Thank you. And the truth is, it isn't. It isn't, right? But, we could get into a very long debate about why one should think so, which is a separate, we need a lot more time and a separate venue for that, right? There are arguments, but it's not really about arguments actually, right? The reality of the Vedanta tradition anyway. Of course there's a ton of arguments, but, really it rests on revelation. Really it rests on intuition. There is some bell that rings in you that knows this is the case, that you're not just this individual, locked up person. So anyway, I'll give you another explanation though, very easy, right? Which is, if you reflect on it, it's really quite true, which is very simple, which is, do you create your next thought? No, right? The thoughts just come to you, right? The thoughts just come to you and then you identify with them. The thought comes to you and then you're like, oh yeah, I thought this, as if you made it, but you obviously didn't make it. So this, but all your actions come from your thoughts, clearly, right? Well, what should I do next? Well, there's a thought that's telling you what to do next, basically. And if you have a debate, an internal debate, every element of that internal debate is also a broadcasted thought from somewhere else, basically. You can call it karma, you can call it God, who knows? But the point is, it isn't you. We just take credit for it, basically. Oh yeah, it's me. I'm thinking that. Even though we have no idea how it's coming about. Because there could be many, many different things, obviously, that we could be thinking about. And we end up on one thing. Why? It's obviously not what we think of as ourselves that's making that happen.
So what is that making me do something and the other person do something else?
Well, what is that?
Is it the same thing that's
Well, I mean,
coming up?
it's a debatable question, right? So that enters the realm. You can say it's God if you like, but the important point is really that you don't have what feels like you is not the one controlling it. It's something else, right? So the moment you say that, and really the truth is, again, this is like exactly along the same lines as recognizing that I don't know who I am. It's actually extremely disturbing admission if you really take in your obvious lack of free will, right? It will immediately paralyze the mind, but it's very, very scary and people will defend against it. They'll be, yeah, I don't have free will, but then they'll act the next moment as if they do. So, so it's not an easy thing to take in, but it's good if you do. And there can be further debates, but essentially from the spiritual standpoint, it's very helpful to admit to oneself that one has no free will, but we carve out an exception for the practice. We carve out, you have the free will to do the practice of self-inquiry, or what I'll describe next, which is surrender. Again, I can respond to various questions about that, but yeah, that's what you keep in mind at first. Yeah. Go ahead, huh?
So it feels a little bit scary because, it's a little bit like you untethered yourself to a certain extent.
Yeah.
It feels, who am I debating with? And if I lose that identity, that sense of identity or identification with, and then I'm also debating, my whole sense of self is wrapped up in that identity.
Yeah.
And then you're having to take a step back and you're having to think about it in a different way. And it feels a little bit scary because you're essentially coming unmoored or untethered from what it is that was attaching.
Yeah. Did you experience anything in those few minutes?
I felt a little bit and then some noise came and I was like,
yeah, exactly.
I went back to it. So
Yeah.
for a brief moment, it just felt like that. It's if you stare at yourself in the mirror long enough,
Yes, exactly. Yes.
It just kind of disassociates from who is this person in front of me in the mirror.
Yes.
So
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Absolutely. That's right. It is scary. It shouldn't be scary really, because the reality is what we're looking for is A, something that we actually are currently experiencing, and B, that which is really our true home and which is perfection. That's what the true self is. It's perfection. Total, effortless perfection, which cannot be taken away from you, which is beyond illness, which is beyond death, which is beyond loss, which is total and complete, right? It's the consolation for everything that happens in life. All regrets resolved there, right? It's amazing. And that's the thing we fear, ironically. So, because the mind is scared of it, because the mind doesn't understand it, that's why. The mind cannot wrap itself around it, that's why. So it does feel like being untethered. You're 100% correct, yeah. And so the question then becomes, if you're doing inquiry, is who has this feeling of being untethered? Because that feeling is disturbing, again, because one identifies with the one who seems to be being untethered, you see? But if that's not me, then what does it matter, you see? So, there's a war going on, because on the one side, the mind will be like, that's too scary, for various reasons. And on the other side, the self-think will be like, too scary to whom? And then the first side will go again, yeah, we can't contemplate that. That very question is also too scary, you know? And it goes back and forth like that. Yeah.
So that's an interesting point, because after your Wednesday meditation, I was trying to do the same thing, not with inquiry, but with the
Surrender.
And it was so scary because
Yeah.
I was deeply surrendering, and I had to pull myself out of it, because I was like, oh my God, I'm falling
Exactly,
freely, and I don't know how far. Twice.
Yeah.
And it happened without even, it was not like I was deliberately sitting like this and meditating. I just finished my work, came down, and let me just surrender. And the moment I said that, I was just dropping like crazy. It was
Beautiful.
crazy.
It's scary, it's beautiful. Yeah, exactly. It is scary, it is scary. Yeah, that's right, exactly. I mean, it is. You know, there really is nothing to be scared of. As you do it again and again, you know, your mind will start to build some faith that it's not going to be, it's okay. But
I have to say that to myself.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
I somehow, instinctively, I brought myself out of that.
Yeah.
That was weird.
Yeah.
And then I regretted. I said,
Yeah,
wait, I was
know.
actually really fine. And then I couldn't go back again.
Yeah, that's how it is. That's how it is, exactly. That's great. I mean, that's good. That's progress, you know, it is.
What were you scared of?
It's like you're dying.
Yeah,
You will be
precisely.
scared.
Precisely.
It's very, I think it's involuntary reflex or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's scary because you're disoriented, basically, right? Your usual guideposts are going to be seemingly lost, right? That's why this is a process. It takes a while, right? Faith is built up, basically, right? Over time with the practice, but it is like, right? It's like being, in some sense, being told that, you know, oh, your whole life is a lie, or something like that, right? Everything you thought was true is not true, right? That would be scary, right? To really accept. So it's like that.
But it can lead you to keen observation of the cosmic players. Like, for example, surrender practice, right?
Yes.
So I am not doing anything, like this is a very critical thing. I want to check how this is taken care. Then you see that when phone call comes, somebody takes care of it. Some other player is talking to the other player.
Right.
And then somebody else is doing this. And things are getting finalized.
Things happen
And
by themselves.
it's not, all the cosmic players are playing and then things are happening.
Yeah.
And you are really keen observation of
Yes.
the whole universe happening around.
Yeah,
On
absolutely.
your case. Yeah.
That's right. No, exactly. No. It's extremely beautiful. I mean, let's be very clear, right? What you're heading towards, even though it seems scary, but it's the boogeyman. There's no boogeyman actually. It's a shadow, right? We're afraid of something that doesn't actually exist. And by applying the practice to those fears will eventually dissolve. And in the process, you will see the beauty of things.
I'm
Yeah,
afraid
exactly.
to talk to him, her, something like that. I'm not even talking anything, but
Yeah.
things that somebody else is talking to them,
Yeah, that's
somebody
right.
else is making them move,
Yes.
and then everything is like a cycle.
Yes.
It get moved, and things happen.
Yes.
And I was really like, oh my goodness, keen
Yes.
observation of the cosmic.
Yes. That's actually another good point, right? So when you do this practice, the more you do it, you will automatically become a much sharper observer of your own psychology and of what's happening around you. It is inevitable. You'll start to see a lot of patterns in your own mind because of this practice. So yeah, exactly.
So I had come for the Tuesday class, and after that I felt that I could do this best in the car for some reason while driving. But at that time I just started realizing the same thing that you were saying about how you're able, at least I could see that whatever I'm thinking, there is a judgment. Like I could observe that there is a judgment that gets attached to the thought, and it becomes magnified at that moment as I'm observing it. But at the same time, I'm not sure if it's the mind that is understanding that, oh, you're so complicated, or you're having a judgment, or is it me? So that space between, is it the mind that's judging, or the mind that is observing? Like, who is the observer at that point?
Well, okay, so it's interesting. So a judgment that you make is most certainly a part of the mind, right? You can say, if you want, you can put it, you can say a part of the mind is judging another part of the mind, let's just say, right? What is you, or what you're looking for is what is observing that entire phenomenon, right? what's observing the basic phenomenon and what's observing the judgment of that phenomenon, right? So yeah, like psychological observations like, oh yeah, this pattern, blah, blah, blah. That's still the mind for sure. It's a thought in the mind. And so what again seems to be you is what is observing that. And that's what you're looking for. Where is the observer? You know? Yeah. Does it make sense?
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to experience that. Am I judging myself? Like, oh, that's a judgment? Or this is awareness, pure awareness?
Well, pure awareness wouldn't be a judgment, right? It would be the aware, whatever is aware of the judgment. Does that?
I get it. I get it. It's just a question of experience.
Yeah. So basically, right? If you're saying like, what was the judgment? Exact judgment you were making again?
So I could observe myself making a judgment on a thought.
Okay.
And
So
it was magnifying itself, and I could see that I'm judging.
right.
But who is doing that seeing? Like, who's making that observation?
If it's the observation that I'm judging, okay, that's a kind of statement, right? That's a thought. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's so the question is, yeah, who or what's behind that basically? I mean the reality is, right, even the idea of observation at all is a thought actually. We're looking for what seems to be the observer, but it's really, anyway, it's getting too philosophical, but essentially we're looking for what the observer is in the waking state, in this waking state. But when we look for that observer, it will yield and show itself to be something which is beyond just the waking state. There's waking, classical Vedanta, waking, dreaming, deep sleep, and the mind functions differently in these different states. The real self is not bound to any of the three. It's behind all three of them. But what we're looking for is the waking state observer, which is what we have access to right now. We're not looking for the true self directly. We're looking for what feels like us right now, which is a kind of illusion. Huh?
My question is, so this awareness of awareness,
Yeah.
is that very ephemeral and elusive that you have to practice it enough to have a longer, like you have it many moments more often to have that experience? Or that's my question.
I would say that you're all the time hunting it, and you shouldn't ever believe that you have that experience.
Because again, it becomes an object.
Because it exactly becomes an object, precisely.
Right.
So it's really more like, where am I? What am I? Right? And being baffled by that, really, because you're experiencing, it's like something you're touching all the time. But the moment you're like, yeah, but what exactly is it that I'm touching? And then suddenly you can't find it. And even when you can't find it, you're still touching it somehow. So, like, how does that work? How is it that we are continuously experiencing something, the nature of which we don't know? Like, it's really weird. That's because it's hidden in plain sight, it's hidden in plain sight. So all-pervasive that it can't be pinned down in the way that the mind would like to pin it down. But in the attempt to pin it down, what will happen is all the things that it's associated with will start being separated away, And those forms which condition it, which it's like which are flavoring it, will be stripped away mentally. And what remains will not seem like what it used to seem like, basically. It will transform that process because all the feeling of our usual ego is generated by the thoughts that are in association, basically.
But for me, it seems to me that whatever I experience, I just go into deep sadness to say that why all this clamoring, what are we like chasing after when I don't know, rather than the scary part of it, it just goes into deep
sadness.
Yeah.
Well, are you sad about when you say like what are we chasing in terms of like humanity generally, why we're all like chasing these random things,
Right,
that kind of thing.
right.
Yeah, I mean, that could be totally, that's a totally understandable reaction.
But that's still the mind, I mean, the
Yes.
scariness or the sadness, everything is a part of the
it's
mind.
all the mind, that's correct. There could be a whole range of reactions, you know, and different reactions in the same person at different times. And you know, what your reaction is coming from your particular mind and body, your experiences, your conditioning. So yeah, so the question is, okay, it's sad, but who am I in this situation? Who's experiencing the sadness? Where am I? Where am I? Right? That's the really critical question. Like, sadness, okay, the thought of sadness, feeling of sadness. Who's having this feeling of sadness, right? It's crazy that we really can't tell, right? So, yeah.
So these feelings, how different are they from, let's say, metacognition? You are aware of, okay, so sadness, scariness, these are all the feelings associated with how you're experiencing this process.
Yes.
But then you're saying that you have to actually distinguish between the experienced and the experiencer.
That's correct. Yes.
And then this is the screen on which all of these things are.
Yeah, you can think of it that way, that's right, but except that you shouldn't necessarily believe that you found the screen. You know, you're hunting for the screen. Where is the screen? I feel that there's a screen. Where is it? Show me the screen. Because you're looking for the screen and all you see is projection after projection after projection. Where's the screen? It's there somehow, you feel it, but where is it? Right, so that's the hunt, basically.
So you're contemplating on that.
You are trying to, you're trying to turn your attention towards that. That which you seem to somehow know, like you seem to somehow know that the screen is there, that you're here, that you're experiencing, that you're the experiencer, that you're the observer, call it what you want, right? You seem to know that. How do you know that? Because it's not like any of these objects are telling you that by themselves. It's not like the TV over there, when you look at it, it's telling you that you are. When you look at the TV, you already immediately, simultaneously know that I'm here, I'm not the TV, I'm experiencing the TV. So there's that piece of knowledge, which is the visual image of the TV, and there's the piece of knowledge, which is me, as the one who's observing the TV. But what does that me who's observing the TV correspond to? How do we know that exactly? It's not like we have to go through like a logical inference, like, oh, the TV image is there, I guess logically, philosophically, that must mean there's an experiencer. No, that's not how we do it. We know immediately, somehow, directly, that there is a distance between that and whatever feels like me. So that, it's like, there's an invisible pole between me and the object. And we always are looking at the far side of the pole. What's the near side connected to? But when we look for the near side, we somehow appear to we land on the far side of another pole, basically. We're looking for like going inward, and all we see is another set of layers of out, but it does go inward actually, it does go inward over time. Seemingly inward, quote unquote.
So recursively we are aware of the awareness, we are aware of the awareness of the awareness and so on. That's how.
Yeah, you can think of it like that. Or you can think of it as just going back to, the base experience. At all times, it's the same light that's illuminating, right? Whether it's, quote unquote, gross object, right, of some like physical object out there, or it's a so-called subtle state of mind, right? Either way, it's really, in some sense, just exactly the same light. It's exactly like a movie, right? The same screen holds for whether it's a picture of a storm or a picture of something like a calm lake. Doesn't matter. It's the exact same light that's being looked for. It's the exact same screen. These metaphors mixed together. I know it's screen sometimes, light sometimes, but anyway, the point is that that's you can go to the base experience, or you can think of it as what's aware of this kind of thing, if you like, if that's easier for you.
But Bhagavan says that you ignore all the other thoughts and go to the I thought. Right?
Yeah. I mean, that is exactly what you're trying to do, precisely. But when you go to the I thought, you end up landing on these other thoughts in the process. You're looking for the I thought, 100%. Yeah, exactly.
And I itself is a thought.
Well, I itself is ultimately a thought, correct? But it's a very special thought. So what is that thought exactly? Yeah.
You land up in the base finally.
You'll land up in Well, and finally, if you weaken all the attachments sufficiently, then what seemed to be the I thought will just poof, yield and show itself to be the self. Yeah.
Wouldn't that be an attachment to I as well?
What would be the attachment to I as well? The desire for liberation? Is that what you mean? When I say attachment, I mean basically some kind of desire or fear or something like that. You know, these are projects connected to what you think you are, right? So I think I'm a person, and therefore I want to protect my health, or therefore I want a piece of chocolate cake, or therefore I want people to think good of me, or therefore I want, to avoid, being in an accident, or whatever it is, right? These are the attachments, the projects that are connected to the conception of who we are. So we're trying to dismantle those conceptions by delving deep into what we think we are and saying, well, that can't actually be right, and they unlock that. And we're touching the process, we're touching something deeper every time, basically, even if we can't quite pinpoint what it is. But yeah, I mean, you could say the desire for getting to the heart of things is a kind of attachment, because it's based on the idea that we are seekers, which is not quite true in the final analysis. That's, however, required. So we have one attachment, which is the desire for liberation, and that is supposed to subsume all the other attachments into itself. That's the idea, yeah. Huh?
So on a slightly different topic, you're talking about you know that you exist, or there is existence, but maybe I'm not doing it right, but for me, I need to convince myself there is existence if something arises or changes. Otherwise, I'm not sure what I would even think.
So even if there seems to be nothing happening, right, that so-called blank state, you're aware of it.
No, I never experienced that, so I don't know what I would conclude. But right now, if I want to prove to myself that there is existence, I have to sort of feel something or sense something or think something. Is that wrong? Is that...
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think, I don't know if it's exactly wrong, but it's, I think, yeah, exactly. I think the issue is that I think you have a certain preconception of what it means to realize you exist.
Yes.
Right? It's just a word, right? But essentially, you know right now that you're aware, right? Do you not know that?
No, I do. But my question is, let's say I didn't see anything at all.
Well, but that's a hypothetical. I mean, I wouldn't even worry about that right now. Like right now, it seems obvious that you know that you're aware. Is it not the case?
Yeah.
Okay, so that obviousness, what is that awareness? Start there, I would start there. Everything else is speculative, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So Akilesh, there's a sort of a co-arising, right, between a subject and the object. They sort of dependent exist one on the other.
Yeah.
So if you use that argument, or rather that as a means, then what we're trying to do here is actually to remove all the objects one by one.
Yeah.
Till the self still has an object which is a dim perception of the ego itself perceiving itself, and then you're saying no.
Yes.
And then when that collapses, both the object and the subject are gone, and the self alone remains. Is what is the leap of faith?
Yeah, you can think
that's
of that.
That's a leap of faith.
Yeah, you can think of that.
For
That's
us,
right?
right?
Yes. You can think of it like that. Yeah, exactly. That's right. Huh?
Is it just like every experience then is in and of itself? Like I've sat a million times, but this is sitting for the first time because you don't have any attachments to what it was like in the past, or?
Well, are you saying like when the final truth is attained?
Yeah, or like is that the goal? Or like
no. See, well, the goal is basically penetration of the illusion. Okay, and when the illusion is penetrated, what then results cannot really be described in words. It is the ultimate goal. Okay, but what then happens cannot be described in words. Why? Because descriptions apply to the kind of self that you think you are. The kind of self that you think you are is the mind. The mind basically cuts up experiences into objects. And so, you know, if you say, for example, like, I'm happy right now, I'm sad right now, I'm angry right now, whatever it is, those are all objects. But those experiences and the words used to describe them are accurate, actually, only if you are what you think you are. It's a complicated topic. Basically, your whole conceptual scheme depends on this idea that I'm this central, core, inner, doing, experiencing thing, essentially. But if you aren't that, which in fact you aren't, then it then turns out that, like dominoes, all the ideas and words about how we would use to describe the experience fall, because they're all dependent on that initial division. But that division is an illusion. So if it's an illusion, well then what? Well, the answer is, then we go beyond the land of concepts. We go beyond the describable. It doesn't mean something weird and alien, although it kind of is weird and alien. But it's also right here and intimate, you know? It's not conceptualizable, is what it is. Even though it's been described in certain ways as bliss and consciousness, etc. But those descriptions are not perfectly accurate.
Is it experience?
It's like you're trying to describe it, but there are no words.
Exactly. There are no words. Precisely. It's exactly what can't be described. It's exactly what can't be described. Yeah, that's right.
So when you're within the light, you cannot tell that you are the light. So.
Right, except that this light is sentient light. It's not dead light. See, light is, we normally think of it as insentient and dead. But this, what we actually are, the self, is not dead. It's not an inanimate object. It's pure awareness. Well, what does that mean? You have to experience it for yourself. Nobody else can describe it to you.
So you negate, like, you experience that appearance, disappearance of every object, and then that's not there, then what remains is that kind of a negation.
We have to hope it comes.
Yeah, I mean,
Experience, appearance, disappearance of anything to do with your senses, you experience it, your mind, everything, and then you say everything, whatever appears, disappears, it's not. And what you see, you keep on negating, and then focus on that. And
yeah.
finally, you end up which doesn't appear or disappear.
Yeah, exactly. You can say that. That's right. I mean, basically, you do your best to focus on discerning, like you say, the changing from the changeless.
Yeah.
And in the process, your attachments, which basically are holding you back from clarity, will weaken. Maybe not completely disappear. They don't have to completely disappear. They have to weaken. They have to weaken sufficiently. And then at some propitious point, God steps in, for lack of a better word, and will open the final gate for you, because you can't open it yourself.
So the final state that you are in, is it a sense of experience that you feel, or what's?
It's exactly what can't be described. It's exactly, it's precisely beyond words, right? So it can't really be said as one or the other, right? That's what it is. It evades description.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it so evades description that it can't even be said that it evades description.
You're in a different state.
Yeah, well, no, it's precisely not a state, actually.
You can say no state.
Yeah, because, see, the whole framework we're in as seekers seem to be in. Actually, the truth is nobody's actually in this. Because this is the nature of the illusion, right? The illusion is, itself an illusion. There's someone who seems to be caught up in this thing called ignorance, and who seems to be trapped in what seems to be an individual perspective, and who seems to be bound by birth and death and all of these things. And that person seems to be doing this thing called seeking. And then they'll seem to be doing this thing called finding eventually. But the finding will reveal that none of those things actually happened. Ever. So right now, there's no seekers. Right now, there's no ignorant person, which is, of course, mind-blowing and bizarre. How could it possibly be? But that's how flawed our way of looking at things is. Huh?
So, okay. So when we reach that not-so state, as you said, right, final destination,
Okay.
if you want to talk about that.
Sure, yes.
So do you, first of all, do you remain in that, is that a final destination and that is it, right? Then you're not a seeker anymore.
Yeah, I mean, you can say that, sure, you can say, I mean, the reality is, the you that could be a seeker is seen to be fictional. That's really what I would say, right? The you that would be a seeker is seen to have never existed. It's not that you are not a seeker anymore, you were never a seeker to begin with. Right, but it's different, it's different. That's a difference though, right? Because people, for example, talk about Hinduism, right? Being liberated from the cycle of birth and death, for example, right? And we're talking about moksha, but the thing is, people, what does that mean, liberated from the cycle of birth and death? Does it mean that you have been living so many lives and then suddenly one day it stops? Not quite. What it means is that the entire idea of there having been such a cycle in the first place is wrong. There's no such cycle ultimately.
No birth, no death.
So no birth, no death, exactly. So that's what's crazy, right? Because how could it be? The whole idea of what has been time is incorrect, essentially. So yeah.
So as you were talking about the attachments and the non-attachments, so we are seekers. This is what we are attached to, right? So once we reach that final destination, that's the point that liberates us from all the attachments in the world. Then, right?
Yes, and you can say that. Yes, absolutely. The thing is, it's immediately contradictory, but it's not exact. See, same thing, liberation from attachments, right? Make sure we understand that correctly, right? Because we imagine this situation, liberation from attachments. What does that mean? That means like some mythological figure who desires a being, a person who desires nothing, who has no preferences, okay? But it's not that. What it is disidentification with the mind and body. Because the mind and body, by their nature, always have preferences. They cannot be entirely eliminated because they exist in time and space, they exist in limitation, and they have to be molded in a certain shape. They have this shape and not that shape. So Ramana says, for example, even somebody sitting in the forest, sitting on a rock, doing nothing, that's not nothing, it's a specific action. They have a preference to do that, to sit on a rock, basically. So it's no more bereft of vasanas or preferences than being out in the world and being super active, basically. It's just a different preference. So what's happening is the recognition, quote unquote, of non-identity with the changing. But then you could ask, you could justifiably ask, who has this liberation? And that's the paradoxical question which can only be resolved through the practice. Because the reality is nobody has this. Nobody has this recognition. Nobody has recognition because nobody had the problem to begin with. Yeah.
I'm just going to backtrack a little bit to the practice.
Yes, please, sure.
So I'll explain it with an example. So just say, I'm seeing a traffic signal over here.
Okay.
So I'm observing that I'm aware that this is the signal I have to take.
Yes.
But at the same time, my mind has already gone off into a tangent saying, oh, the last time I came here, something happened.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So immediately there is also that awareness of this. And the mind is also thinking, why did you have to get yourself distracted? Come back. This is a loss of energy, or just come back to what you're doing.
Okay.
So there is some back and forth that's happening over here.
Sure.
Which anyway has to happen to cleanse the mind of this. Right? So is that, I'm trying to see if this is what is the nature of self-inquiry. Should I even engage in this?
Oh, that kind of process? Well, that would be more like a quote-unquote psychological process, right? And psychological processes of cleansing can be very valuable. And what I always say about that is essentially, you can take two stances depending on where you are, and both are acceptable, right? So, you can take the position in any particular moment that I need to step back and deal with the psychological issue, and I can go ahead and identify, quote unquote, identify, even though there's a ridiculous illusion, but you can identify with the mind and the body and do the psychological process in that moment. Or you can take the position that I'm going to do the practice. And if I do the practice, then whatever happens outside the practice is irrelevant to me. And I'll add in that if one does the practice of inquiry, or what I should describe right now, which is the practice of surrender, then the mind and body are fully capable of doing anything without you. without what feels like you, I should say, really. We don't have to trust in that, but that is in fact the case, because they are in fact doing everything without what feels like us. So what that means is that one can engage in inquiry or surrender, and the kind of psychological cleansing process that you're talking about can still happen. Can still happen. It will not use your effort, however. It will just occur by itself, which actually it's already doing. So does that make sense? So it's
So
two
both are
different layers.
happening at the same time.
Both can be happening at the same time. That's correct. Exactly. They can. They needn't. I mean, if you do the practice, the psychological process may not happen. And so let me get to surrender, actually, because it's kind of a root right into this. So what is surrender, basically? So surrender basically is, kind of as the term suggests, is letting go of our effort, basically, vis-a-vis the world. Letting go of our desire letting go of our attempt to control it. So what surrender is, I usually describe it in two different pieces, which are really linked. And in one I say, really, it's ignoring everything. Ignoring everything. What do I mean by ignore? What I mean by ignore is not that you suppress or repress anything, but rather that you permit everything, all perceptions, all emotions, all thoughts, to be in your awareness, but you essentially don't allow your attention to get lost in any of these things. Yeah. So, for example, I mean, a metaphor I always use is like a television. Okay, television is on, okay, and it's playing something, and you don't have to turn the TV off, and you do not have to change the channel. You merely have to make sure that you don't get hypnotized by the TV. You have to keep recognizing that this is just a TV, basically. This is just a TV. And you withdraw your attention in some sense away from the TV. Now, what happens when you withdraw the attention from the TV is, for lack of a better word, you are immediately transfixed by another TV. And then you repeat this process. So what you're doing is you're continuously bringing your attention back from the objects, back from all particular experiences. Towards what? Well, towards what is not the particular experiences, which we already know from inquiry is in the direction of the self, what feels like you. So really, inquiry and surrender are two sides of a different coin. The other aspect of surrender, which is really connected to the first, is that you relax your willpower. What feels like your personal effort. What feels like your personal effort. What I mean by personal effort is anything which feels like this burdensome focus, where I'm focusing on something, okay? You relax that muscle. For everything in life without exception, well, with the single exception, with the single exception of the practice of surrender. So the practice of surrender is I'm defending my attention from being drawn out into the world and from taking it seriously, from devoting any effort whatsoever to anything, basically. And so what you do is you regard your mind and body as another person. Like what you thought is you is 10 feet over there, and it's their problem to deal with life, whatever decisions may come. You're not saying they shouldn't act. You're not saying they should act. You're disclaiming responsibility for either action or inaction. It's not your decision anymore whether to act or not act and how to act. That's what surrender is. So let's all try that for 5 minutes. I should allow people on Zoom, by the way, I should have asked earlier, but if anyone on Zoom wants to talk about their experience, please feel free. Hold on. Let me please volume here. Could you say that again?
How do I know whether it's my attention that's being pulled away or if it's just something else?
What do you mean? What else could it be?
It's like when I
Well, feeling you're not doing it correctly is, it's a common obstacle, and you should recognize it as just another thought, and have faith that the practice will teach you what it is over time. But the idea that it's generating more thought, I mean, at the beginning that may be true, because you haven't done this practice before, and it is a new thing that you're doing, in a sense. But what you're trying to do is, you're trying to, I think I've said, I've used the metaphor before, essentially trying to allow your focus to relax on everything, right? Except the vigilant practice of defocusing. You're defocusing, and then immediately you should assume that immediately, as soon as you've done that, now you're again, you've automatically, as a matter of habit, refocused on something else. And so now you have to defocus again, and again, and again, again.
Till?
Huh? till forever. Look, see, the thing is, the practice is, we're looking till the attachments weaken, because basically clarity, see, essentially, speaking of fear, right, the mind is afraid of losing itself in the unknown, right? And so the attachments prevent clarity. The mind, represented by its projects, prevents you from seeing. In other words, what it is there's a part of you that does not want to see, let's put it that way, right? So one has to do the practice over and over again and start to experience the benefits of practice, namely greater peace. And that greater peace will weaken the attachments, because you'll be like, why do I care about X, Y, or Z when I'm experiencing peace through this? Why am I reaching the hard way all the way around like for this crumb when I can just get it through this, which you'll start to experience. And as you do that, you'll do it more and more and more, and the other things will become less and less and less important, and the desire for this to go on continuously will increase, right? And eventually it will yield, and clarity will happen.
That is what I observed. Like I started shifting it. The moment I realized that I'm focusing on this and thinking this, I shifted, and that also took me a place where I was numb towards things. Like when I saw the wall, it is blue, was a part. Then I shifted, and then the moment I saw it again, it was numb. I didn't decide that, I didn't think that it was blue, but knowing that I'm not thinking, that is another act.
Yes,
again.
exactly.
So,
That's right.
So you're chasing it.
Yes, exactly. So you see the parallel to inquiry, right? Because in the same way that inquiry is chasing I, here you're trying to rapidly withdraw your attention from the objects, right? And so, again, where does that attention go? It's going in the direction of the subject. The direction of the subject. Just like inquiry, as you go in the direction of the subject, again, you're going to encounter more objects. Just like an inquiry, when you're looking for I, you're encountering what's not me. And then you push that away, and then you're like, well, yeah, what am I? And again, not me. You keep saying not me. But it's a subtler and subtler object, over time. But anyway, you're still looking in the same way, with surrender, the same thing's happening. You're pulling your attention away from the particulars towards what is less particular, what is subtler, essentially, over time. But still an object, and then eventually it comes inward, it's just a metaphor. There really is no inward or deeper. Those are just metaphors, but that's a way of thinking about it. You got a question?
So we are just focusing on our breath, right? And say this, we want to defocus, focus. Again, I breathe in, defocus, it's fine. But then again my lungs will again breathe in, breathe out,
Yeah,
right? Again the focus comes back.
Sure.
So we are just going back and forth just with the awareness on the breath. It's like focus, defocus, nothing else coming in between. So where do we stand here? Like if I see myself that I'm playing a movie and I'm enacting in that movie, I sit here and witness that from birth to death, my movie is happening there.
Yes.
And then you can consecutively create more and more movies that, okay, there is one person sitting and witnessing that. That will be the next awareness.
Yeah, right.
So that's the recursive awareness that you're talking about, right?
Yeah, you can think
so
of it
when
like
I
that.
talk about the breath, I didn't know how to surrender, right? Because again there is focus. This do defocus, focus. What does surrender mean when I'm observing the breath?
Well, so are you saying that you would surrender based on the rhythm of the breath? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, not judging it at all, right? We don't want to judge anything.
Sure. I mean, I would say really, technically speaking about judgment,
But
right.
what I'm saying
No,
is
go
the
ahead.
physical body is bringing me back, right? Because I need to gasp for breath. The lung is breathing.
Yeah, I'm sure. Okay,
So
but that doesn't
what-
necessarily. So every time you refocus, you defocus again. Basically, is what it comes down to. Yeah, basically.
So is that a good practice just to focus, defocus just on the breath? Because there's no other thought that
I
I'm
mean,
focusing on.
I wouldn't necessarily forcibly link it to the breath. You know, I think what you're saying is because you're breathing in and out in a way that is sort of conditioning the mind to refocus. So you can think of that, but I wouldn't try to do your defocusing based on your breath. I would just try to defocus, period. And you will automatically refocus, and then you will try to defocus again, and you'll try to guard that defocus
So
as
that
best
the
you
breath
can.
happens automatically and there's no focus there.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be focusing. It may or may not be exactly aligned with the breaths. You know, I'm sure breath has something to do with it, but many things have things to do with it. There are many factors as to what will govern when you refocus again or how you refocus again, basically. But yeah, the way I would view it is essentially, even if you're holding your breath, is what I'm trying to say. For example, right, you're still going to be focusing and defocusing. Yeah. You can view it as the focusing is going to be involuntary to some extent, or again, even if you defocused, you're going to involuntarily refocus on something subtler, essentially, right? So, for example, right, if you're doing the practice of surrender, right, you're going to get to a point eventually where you will feel peace, okay? But that peace is a state, so that peace is an object, so that peace must also be surrendered, essentially, in other words. So that's an example of you defocused, but then you refocus on something subtler, essentially. So you have to recognize that and not become hypnotized by that. That's the challenge.
So every state that you sort of receive into, you just have to keep going.
Yes,
keep going.
exactly. You're holding to whatever is not a state. But you got a question, I think. Yeah.
Oh, maybe I'm ignorant or I'm doing something wrong. I didn't know what to surrender, or I was blank. My mind is blank.
So that blankness, you have to just recognize this blankness it's occurring to me, essentially. It's an experience, right? And so don't get lost in the blankness. Keep yourself aware of the blankness, essentially. Take it to be an illusory phenomenon, and you're not going to allow yourself to focus on it, essentially. Does that make sense?
No, I probably would do that, but here I felt like I have to surrender, and so I need to think of something to surrender. So I kept focusing, I focused on that. I didn't have any feeling on the black thread. So, no, because you told us that surrender.
It is surrender,
So I didn't know what to.
No, even if the thing is, when you think you're experiencing nothing, you're not experiencing nothing. You are experiencing something. The something seems like nothing. That something which seems like nothing is the experience of a blank. Just like, for example, looking at a white page. Like a white page is not nothing. It's a white page. It doesn't have anything written on it, but it's still a white page. It has a certain character to it. That, because it comes and goes, right? Whatever comes and goes, right? You weren't experiencing that blankness 10 minutes ago, now you are, and a few minutes from now you won't be again. That means it's an experience. So that is a thing. That's the thing which you're trying to not get lost in, but rather withdraw your attention into, keep yourself awake, essentially. This is like a dream, right? Each thought is like a little dream. You can get lost in the dream, or you can try to smack yourself awake, basically. So we're trying to smack ourselves awake from the dream every time, so that we don't take it seriously. We don't think we don't forget that this is actually, a framed picture rather than the actual thing.
Yeah, the question is surrender to whom? Surrender to yourself.
You can view it as surrender. Yeah, to whom? If it's to whom, then yes.
Surrender to yourself. You're surrendering to yourself.
She was saying surrender what?
I think she was saying surrender what?
I was trying to surrender
something
myself. I mean, what am I
surrender?
Because I came with a state of mind with a
seemingly blank mind, right?
Yeah, so that's why.
But that's my point.
Otherwise, I wouldn't be here.
So basically, what you're saying here is peace is not enough.
Correct.
Being peaceful is
That's
not
correct.
enough.
Yes, it's a good thing. I mean, and it is the honey that will motivate you along the path for sure. But the peace is not enough, because eventually what happens is, or another way of looking at all this is, if you do self-inquiry or if you do surrender, either way, you are effectively asking, who am I, okay? And in response to your intense practice, either way, you're being given an answer. The answer you're being given is in the form of a mirror, okay? The mirror is showing you, this is who you are, okay? And that mirror is showing something extremely beautiful, ecstatic, wonderful, amazing, right? Various kinds of things. The problem is, we then make a mistake of thinking that we are the reflection. But we're not the reflection. The reflection has to be understood as, this is a reflection of me. There's a recognition, right? Just like a kid, right? Very small child, doesn't understand that the mirror is it's not somebody else. It's them, right? It's them from a certain angle, actually, really, right? The reflection is, under these conditions, this angle, this room, right now, with my eyes, it looks like this. But we don't want to be reliant on the mirror to know who we are. There has to be another connection made. Like, oh, this is who I am, whether or not there's a mirror, basically, to show me this fact. So that's what that last bit of surrender inquiry does, and that's what God's grace does, basically, is it catapults that recognition, basically. Yeah.
So, I have one question on the technique of surrender. So when I do surrender, and when the surrender goes very intense, like when I'm not having any willpower or any thoughts, attachment, anything, my eye starts seeing something blurry, and it starts closing. And then there is a willpower to open the eyes again. How do you get out from that? I didn't surrender.
Well, why is there a willpower to open the eyes again? Interesting question, right? That's something which you potentially can relax, right?
Yeah. So if your eyes gets closed, so you stay
Yeah,
in that
sure.
state and
Sure. You can keep the vigilance up, whatever happens, right? Whether the eyes close or open, even though I say practice with your eyes open, if your eyes close by themselves, so to say, then of course you can just surrender that fact. Yeah.
and still get out from having any willpower to do
Sure.
anything.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Exactly. It's very, very much like talking about falling, right? I love the metaphor of throwing a boulder in the ocean and it just falls. That's what surrender is. It is falling like that, It is allowing yourself to go slack, like a dog that is really tired and just decides, I'm not going to go even one more step. I'm just going to flop on the ground, basically. Pick me up if you want to. I'm not doing anything else, okay? It's that, right? It's refuse. I don't care. You do it. You do the work. You do the work. Yeah.
That happened again. Surrender is my favorite technique anyway. So, no, this time I was not tired. So this time I did not fight it.
Okay.
So I said, okay, let it happen. So, however, there were some good experiences, there were some emotional experiences, there was all kinds of nice things. But then I questioned that too. So that's when you shatter it in a way, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Like you said,
Yes.
that flop, that
Yes.
dog just saying,
Yes.
I'm going to go to the ground.
Yes.
It feels great.
Yeah.
But then I instinctively decided that if you're in a cozy land, there is a problem. So I said, okay, that's not what this is then. So you see, this whole process is probably just never going to end.
No, that's good. See, the thing is, the coziness is only, there's still an intensity even in the coziness, right? Because you're defending it, right? That's the point. The dog is flopping, but you need an intense alertness to continuously defend that flop, because the habits and attachments are so ingrained that within 1 second, you're going to be immediately hooked again and unflop, basically. So the intensity, that's the non-cozy part. But even within the coziness, you're still paranoid, basically, hyper vigilant. and protecting that essentially.
Yeah, your intense inquiry at that point makes you emotional.
It
Because
can.
the intention that the
It
emotion
can.
is created by that. The other side is really happiness. You are letting it go. But your intense practice going further makes you tired.
Yeah, no, see, I mean, say again, so
You are letting everything else fall.
yeah, you're letting me else
But
fall,
you are
correct.
really searching, who is feeling this?
So that's more the inquiry piece, and you can view it like that if you like. Any point you can switch, right? So for example, right?
I was inquiring because then
exactly.
when I flop too much,
Yeah.
then I said, okay, who is
Who's
flopping?
Yeah, exactly.
I had to because otherwise
Yeah.
I was
Yeah,
getting
that's
into
what I
this
said.
cozy wow
Uh-huh.
type of feeling, right? Then I said, okay, who is feeling that wow?
That's good. That's really good.
That's
Exactly.
what I meant.
You can do that, right?
Yeah.
But you can also just keep surrendering, right? The point is, as long as you recognize this is happening, whatever this wonderful feeling is a feeling, and you keep noticing essentially the distance between you and it, right? That's the point, right? You're like, that's not me, that's not real, right? And and don't get spellbound to it, right? That it can be there. And that actually, by the way, anyway, if you want to prolong those states, okay, that's the way to do it. Because by surrendering them, you protect them actually.
When you remember, when you hold on to the I thought that the Layam stage comes in, so you are so happy, peaceful. You said you should not stay there. You have to poke it and get out of there.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So that's what I think. What Ashwini, you were saying is the same thing, right? When you start going into that peaceful mode, surrender.
No, but it is being poked. So when you surrender it, you're saying, don't completely lose yourself in it.
Right.
That is the poking.
But it's nice to lose yourself. I have experienced that.
Of course it is. Of course it is. Yes.
But you are very relaxed, but you will also observe that your part is being taken care by somebody else also.
Yeah, I mean,
that also
sure.
will happen.
Yeah, it can. You should just be careful about that. Right? We shouldn't expect the universe will work without us.
Yes,
but
that's
but how it works, we can't control.
Yeah. You will notice the symphony.
Right. The symphony may not always play the song that you thought you wanted. Yeah. As long as they are aware of that. Yeah.
So one question so in surrender, you don't push away things, you let things be.
Yeah, let things be, exactly.
In inquiry, do you push away?
No, also no. So both you allow all phenomena to occur. You're not ever pushing away any emotions or thoughts. All you're doing is you're using your focus on a particular point, on a kind of horizon point, virtual point, which is in inquiry you're actively searching for I, and in surrender you're actively trying to withdraw your attention, basically. So things can be in the background, basically, in other words, right? They're all there. You're not saying they shouldn't be there, you're just not paying them a lot of attention.
It's a bit like an autopilot. You're sort of an autopilot.
Yeah, you're on autopilot with respect to everything except the practice. So the practice, you have intense focus, willpower, and like deliberateness with respect to the practice. But with respect to everything else, no.
So when you're doing this on a daily basis, things that every day were so important to you, all of those things, those sort of become less important,
Yeah, exactly.
and then you kind of focus on this inquiry within, and you're going deeper in.
Yeah, either surrendering or inquiring, either one. Yeah,
Yes, but even the surrender, like I surrender today, but
Yes.
tomorrow again something comes up. So it's like a everyday struggle.
It's an every moment struggle. Yeah.
Right? I
Yeah.
did that, but then tomorrow something else comes and I go right back to that.
Of course, that's exactly right. So it's going to be a fight, basically. Yeah, that's right. It's going to be a fight until such time as you overcome a certain critical mass of attachments, and then it will get much easier and easier and easier. And eventually it will be effortless.
And I think that's where the Sangha also plays a role. We're all together
Yes.
with the same goal.
Yes, definitely, that helps. 100%. There's a lot of things that help, right? I mean, a lot of things, there's a whole series, I didn't really talk about them, but truth is, there's a whole bunch of spiritual practices that are less demanding than surrender or inquiry that can be used when you aren't feeling up to surrender or inquiry. But surrender or inquiry are the most demanding. They're the most directly challenging of one's identity, right? But one isn't always up to that, and that's okay. You can do whatever you can do in that moment. So for example, karma yoga, which is, what is that? Karma yoga is, you are going to identify with the doing of actions, right? Surrender inquiry, you're directly fighting that identification. But karma yoga says, yeah, I'm going to do the actions that I should be doing, quote unquote, but I'm going to try to do them with the attitude that the results are not mine. The results are God's or the universe's. And I'm going to have equanimity no matter what happens, failure or success. That's not mine to decide. It's not mine to enjoy. I'm just dedicated to the process, right? That's a spiritual practice that purifies the mind and that helps it on its way to doing more surrender and inquiry. And that's less challenging of the attachment than surrender and inquiry, because you're like, okay, I can go ahead and do the work I'm supposed to do and identify with that doing, even though it's an illusion to do that. But or it could be anything else. It could be chanting mantras. It could be reading books that are spiritual, or coming to sanghas, of course. Anything, all of these practices, going to temples, anything which quiets your mind, doing psychological work, changing your diet, changing your sleep patterns. All of these knobs are there to play with, actually, to see where what basically helps you sustain the practice in a more durable fashion.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
I noticed that when in silence, I notice a lot of little things, but when I'm interacting with people, when I go out and about, I'm very much under the hypnosis, and it's gotten so painful that I just get triggered left and right. I get triggered left and right, and I feel in retreat.
Yes.
But at the same time, there's also part of me that's saying maybe retreat is not the way to go about life. So I'm not sure when I have to interact, how can I, I feel like at this point, just whatever the programming you give is running, it's
Right.
not the background or anything. So how can I practice now when I'm even interacting with people?
Well, for example, a couple of things. There's clearly a huge psychological component to that, right? So I'm going to recommend, again, to the whole group, right, which is what I recommend constantly, which is really good therapy, basically. Seriously, I think it's a really, really underrated spiritual tool, because one's psychological issues have to be worked out, and that's probably the best tool. Good psychoanalytic psychotherapy, very useful for that. And from a purely spiritual angle, I think it's the other things that I mentioned, right? So if you can't do surrender or inquiry, if you're too spellbound by interactions with people, then try karma yoga. Try some of these other practices that will help you quiet your mind, right? Things like pranayama, which is breath control. Things like even movement practices, various yogic practices. There's a whole panoply of things that you can try that will quiet your mind in various ways. That's a bit of a personal quest to figure out which methods work for you to do that. So I can't give a one-size-fits-all solution. But is that helpful?
Yeah, in other words, I can do those practices. I can meditate, but once I'm off the question, I'm hypnotized again,
Well, like I said, look, go seek good therapy. That is the best option, honestly, because it's clearly a big psychological. And you're not alone. The vast majority of people have a lot of psychological issues, that it would help them spiritually to deal with. So that would be my top recommendation, really, seriously. And to many people, many people have these issues. Lots of issues like that. Issues about being people-pleasing. Issues about being totally beholden to duty. Issues about rebelliousness and conformity. All kinds of issues, okay? And, they don't look at them. They try to hop over them purely with the spiritual. Unfortunately, it's really an obstacle because it will, it's sapping people's energy and their ability to do the spiritual work. So, yeah. I think you had a question, right?
Yeah.
I'll get back to it. Sorry.
I thought I'll just share my experience what happened.
Sure.
Normally I meditate with my eyes closed.
Okay.
Just meditate on mantra or something. So then after some time, if I'm tired, I'll just get to sleep, right? So take a nap. So today, both sessions, I kept my eyes open, and I found it's very profound effect because earlier first session I was looking at something for like trees or things, so mind was started wandering, and I let it go, right? So the second one, when I made it very intense, rather than focusing outside, I just brought my vision down and look at the flow. And as thoughts come, okay, I need to be here. I just give the instruction to myself that I need to be here.
Okay.
So that removed all the thoughts, right? And it becomes very intense. Then after some time, then I brought that sense of surrender.
Yes.
Okay, now I need to let it go. When I brought the sense of surrender, everything become easy. Still I was focusing,
sure,
but it was not intense.
Okay.
Then become everything started dissolving. So I thought I'd share.
That's great. That's great. Exactly. And so if you can just keep that up, right? Basically, continue that. Yes. That's great. Thank you. You had a question?
I mean, I was more focusing about Anilji was about to ask a question. Yeah. So I just want to share this. I just felt like, playing Mario. I have played only 2 or 3 times Mario in my life.
Okay.
Right? Just making jump up and down and clear this and that, right?
Yes.
Can I let it go? Right? Just let it drop in the cosmos, in the darkness. Can I be like that? And is that what surrender is?
So, are you? I have to ask this clarification. When you say that, when you're playing Mario, it seems to you like you're putting effort when you're playing the game, right? But you're talking about Mario, the character, and his seeming state of effortlessness. Is that what you mean?
Right. I mean, I'm putting it to work. So it just felt like I'm putting my mind to work. Every time with all those thoughts. So can I let those thoughts go and just drop myself, just like I did to Mario, in that darkness.
Wait, like when you were playing, are you saying when you played the game, you felt like you were able to let the other thoughts go? Is that what you mean?
Yes.
And sort of just be in that moment?
Yes.
Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, yes, in a sense, that is what you're going for. But I would just hesitate to give a definitive answer there because, again, the truth is, any description of it will be like, see, look, people have these flow states, okay, which are described in different ways, okay? They are kind of states of intense concentration, samadhi, etc., right? They are glimpsy states of various kinds, and they occur in various contexts. So, for example, right, people will talk about athletes or musicians who go into these states where they feel suddenly catapulted into total effortlessness, right? Where instrument is playing them. Or the athlete for whom suddenly every ball goes into the basket, right? Effortlessly. Somehow it's doing, the divine is doing the work, right? It sounds like maybe you had some kind of somewhat similar experience maybe with Mario. Those states are like reflections of the self, So we can't guarantee that any state of any kind is going to continue forever. It won't. All states will come to an end. But there is an important aspect of that experience that can be recognized as oneself. And that's what can happen. Yeah.
We can probably discuss as we eat.
Okay, great. Yeah. So
we have one Bhojan mantra, Brahmarpana, together. Brahmarpanam Brahmahavihi Brahmano Brahmanahutam Brahmaiva tena gantavyam Brahma karma samadhina. We can do Sarve Bhavantu together. Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukha